What's up, everybody? Welcome to Climb the Ladder for episode 176, presented by Washed Up Network. I'm your co-host Hunter, and my equally good-looking twin brother Duncan is right here with me. We are excited to get back into it with you guys with episode 176, and we are always brought to you by our sponsor, The Great PNW. So head on over to thegreatpnw.com and use code CLIMB20 for 20% off your purchase. As always, let's climb the ladder.
Hey everyone, excited to be back in full capacity. I know the last couple months have been a little bit different format than you used to. Obviously with Hunter having a baby, and then as soon as he kind of got back into the swing, I had a baby, and so um, we're 6 weeks out from my baby being born, 10 weeks out from his. But I appreciate the grace and the patience. We've, of course, tried to bring you content along the way, but excited to be back for a full blown CTL episode 176. Never wavering, always trying to keep you guys in mind, and of course, keep up with all the awesome things in sports. So today we want to go over a few things to kind of put a bow on baseball season with a couple things that are happening across MLB. And then, of course, the hottest topics right now, talk a little college football and NFL. So what do you say, Hunter? Should we get into it?
Let's do it. Yeah, I thought we'd start off just right off the bat, clean up some baseball stuff before we go full-fledged outside the diamond into football, and we'll probably save some hockey for another week, but that is also underway. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's just been a couple weeks. We took a little bit of a Thanksgiving break. But right before that, it was announced that Julio Rodriguez, the Mariners' very own, was named second time Silver Slugger award. So that's back-to-back seasons for him in his rookie and sophomore seasons.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty big deal for the Mariners, especially as they're trying to establish some credibility within the team, with the fan base. For Julio, who's one of the most promising players across all of MLB, to have back-to-back Silver Sluggers, I think it's a testament to people paying attention. I think people know Julio Rodriguez's name already, and I think if he can do anything like Ken Griffey Jr. did, I think we'll be in good shape, especially because we already signed him to a long-term contract. So cool to see him get the award that he deserves, and hopefully we can translate that into some postseason success next year.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, to be able to have him up there in the conversation would just be electric. Speaking of some of the top guys, at the same time as that was announced, we also had our MLB's most valuable players. So the MVP for the National League and for the American League. Dunk, did you see who those are?
I did not.
Oh, yeah,
Oh
it's
yeah, nope, I do see that. So we've got Acuna Jr. and Otani bringing in the awards.
yeah, so I mean, Acuna just, I mean, on the National League side, just tore it up, um, just all over, like smashing records, and then, I mean, setting history on the other side of the league for Otani, like at the plate or on the mound, like just crazy. Even with his injuries at the end of the season, I wonder if he could have smashed all the records that he did and only played like half a season. Wouldn't something like that, like a weird baseball stat like that, wouldn't that just be nuts?
Yeah, it's crazy what Acuna Jr. was able to do this season, and it's funny in MLB whenever one person is really good, it seems like they just totally hone in on that, like the whole Judge thing back in 2022, and then Acuna Jr. I think he got a lot of press this year, but so good. And then Otani, of course, leaving the Angels and trying to find a new home, probably somewhere on the West Coast. Two of the biggest names in baseball, and rightfully deserving of the MLB
Yeah,
MVP.
no doubt. Um, Well, like we said, just wanted to clean up a couple baseball things. We'll get into some more off-season transactions and things when the sports world really starts to slow down and we're really itching for that baseball. But right now, football is filling the TV screens and keeping us on our toes with everything that's happening. Um, so I think we got to jump outside the diamond, and no better time than now to kick it off with some college football and where we're at with championships and bowl games and playoffs.
Yeah, not sure if you saw the link that I sent over, but it seems like only to do justice to the championship games, we can go through the 10 college football conference championships and see what we've got coming up this weekend. If there's any upsets you think, if there's anybody that maybe got in that didn't deserve to be in the championship, and then what matchups we're most excited for because a couple of these are going to have big college football playoff implications.
Yeah, I mean, right off the bat, I mean, right off the bat, there's just a couple headline grabs. Um, Says it's the most awkward championship. Yeah, conference title games even continue to be played in the playoff era. I mean, that's a valid question. We could start there. We could go through these and then talk about it. But there's a lot of things like even the conversation about if there's four undefeated teams after championship weekend going into the playoffs, are those a lock to play in the NCAA playoffs in the four-team format or not? So we'll get into that, but let's start off with the 10 championship games.
Yeah, starting at number 10, we have the conference championship for Conference USA, which is New Mexico State taking on number 24 Liberty, who's sitting at 12-0 undefeated on the season. Coming up this Friday, so probably today if you're listening to it. Happy December. Um, any thoughts on the CUSA Conference Championship?
Yeah, man, I think that one's I mean, kind of number 10 on the list for a reason, probably. Not a bunch of shine, not a bunch of implications, but I mean, hey, they made it and they're there.
Yeah, it looks like it's Liberty's first season as a member of CUSA, and just their sixth season in FBS football. So definitely making a statement. And I mean, being top 25 is not a joke, and that's not taken lightly. So good for them. And I feel like as an undefeated team, you might as well just cap off the season at 13-0.
Yeah, it's kind of wild to look at the lines on here. I mean, even if people don't bet, it's so telling because Vegas uses all those algorithms and everything else to like determine so much, and people's money is literally on the line. But going into this, Liberty is 11 and a half point favorites over New Mexico State. Shouldn't a conference championship be the best of the best from that conference and be like a 2.5 or 3.5 point spread?
Yeah, I mean, we'll get into that at the top of this list when we get to the Pac-12, but I think we'll see some bigger lines than you would expect to as you go through these conference championships.
Yeah, and I don't think you said it, but outside of the top four teams in the country, as far as rankings go, Liberty is the only other undefeated team this season.
Oh yeah, I don't think I said that explicitly, but good for them for being undefeated.
Yeah. Who do we got next on the list?
Next up, we have the Sun Belt Conference with Appalachian State taking on Troy a little bit closer, with Troy being favored by 6.5. Um, but an interesting one here. All of the talk has been about James Madison, who had College Game Day go to them. They were undefeated until that game, actually, where College Game Day made the appearance. But unfortunately for James Madison or JMU, they are ineligible to compete in. I think they're ineligible to compete in bowl games. Um, and I don't remember what the thing was. I think they had a transitionary period from FCS to FBS, but that left the opportunity for the Mountaineers to sneak in and take on Troy. We played Troy a couple years ago at Boise State, and they're kind of like a junior Alabama, so they are a good team. They're probably the best traditionally in the Sun Belt. But it seems like an 8-4 versus a 10-2. Um, Feels like Troy's got the upper hand, especially with a 6.5 point spread, but never know. These smaller group of five schools can be kind of scrappy.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, the fun thing with these, I mean, whether you're a bettor or not, is just seeing what happens. Like for somebody to throw like, I don't know, a $20 bet on some random, like what's gonna happen in Appalachian versus Troy? Like no one knows. Um, but like that's a fun element to it. Or hey, at the least, it's football on the TV on Saturday. Boom. Enough said. We wait all year for it. So then to not tune into a game like this is not acceptable. So gotta gotta have that on the docket. That is a 4 p.m. Eastern time on Saturday, which it's kind of funny that App State and Troy gets a middle of the day slate on Saturday, but I guess you got to fit them in somewhere.
Yeah, I think they are probably trying to leave most of the bigger matchups to Saturday night format. But another midday conference championship is the MAC. We're looking at some action with the Miami of Ohio versus Toledo. So we've got a little inner Ohio matchup in the group of five of the MAC conference. And looks like two pretty good teams sitting at 10-2 and 11-1. Miami of Ohio's only losses are to Toledo and then the other actual Miami, um, which is kind of crazy. And then, uh, yeah, Toledo's only sitting at one loss. So looks like looks like it's anybody's game. Toledo favored at 7.5 points, but with only a one win or loss swing, it seems like the game should feel closer than that.
I think that this is what a championship weekend matchup should be. Conference championship matchup. They're in the same state. You know, they have some history. It says that Toledo could win 12 games for the first time um, since they had back-to-back 12-0 seasons in 1970 and 71. So right there, just looking at boom, history. Like albeit that's just for their team, but like everything that's going away in the future with all the conference realignment and, UW Wazoo splitting up for us in the Northwest, Oregon State splitting up, California rivalry schools splitting up, like something like this in the MAC, boom, they're both in Ohio. The people in that area in the Midwest want to see this matchup. I bet there's diehard fans at these schools. So I like this, 7.5 points, a lot can happen. So um yeah, this will be a good Maction game in the middle of the day on Saturday.
Definitely. Well, take us into the number seven on our list, which has it's not the only double digit spread, but it is the biggest of our conference championships this Saturday.
Being Oregon against UW.
That one's actually a smaller spread, but we can
Oh,
jump up to that one if you want to.
no, no, no. Go with that. I hit the wrong one. Texas, Oklahoma State.
Or
Oh, my list isn't in the same numbered order.
oh, I thought I sent you the list.
Yeah, it didn't work.
Oh, well, per the
Does anybody
athletic,
have a login to Athletic? Because I don't have it.
I don't either.
I don't know, it kicked me out. I was
Oh,
just
dang.
flowing. I found another list.
Well, I can go to a different list, but for now, we're going to talk about the Big Ten championship. with Michigan and Iowa, not
See,
to be
that's the
confused
thing
with.
where the conversation goes into the new NCAA or newer NCAA playoff format. This is where like everybody wants to see Ohio State versus Michigan in the championship game. You're not looking for the winner of that end of the regular season game to go play Ohio State or Iowa State or whatever. Like you want the biggest matchup in the championship. So why is it structured like that and doesn't even make sense? Or then say Michigan and Ohio State played in the championship game, not a regular season game. So they both go into this undefeated potentially. And then one of them has one loss that doesn't even matter because not even all the rest of the conference teams are playing that number of games. That's where it might not even make sense.
Yeah, I think we saw the Mountain West get rid of that finally this year, where it wasn't the Mountain and the West. Um, I want to say the Pac-12 did away with it too, but um, classic example, everybody wants to see another Michigan Ohio State matchup, which could potentially be three of those in a season if you had the regular season, the conference champion, and the playoff, which is very realistic if the Big Ten would ditch their terrible method of the West versus the East or the North or whatever they have. So, anyways, Michigan favored by 23 and a half, which is just
Wild.
ridiculous. That's an absurd spread for a conference championship when technically you're saying that these are two of the best schools in your conference. And I think that we know that Ohio State or Michigan could absolutely dominate um, their opponents. So it's
Yeah,
kind
and
of,
that's the thing. I mean, you have this on a primetime Saturday night game. This is going to be a stinker.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it'll change, and we're going to continue to see the shifting of the college football landscape with
Yeah, it has
one, the
to.
expanded playoff, but two, with all these other schools jumping into these conferences. Next year, you could have Oregon or Washington in this conference championship very easily. But I think no matter what, even if you weren't getting more schools into your conference, I think you have to eliminate the divisions or not go with the divisions. Just like the Mountain West finally just did away with the Mountain and the West. And they're just taking the two best teams, which we got the benefit of this year.
Could you imagine if they weren't? And then, you know, Boise State and UNLV that we'll get to, if they were in the same conference or same part of the conference, like then you're playing in a what? You're a 5 or a 6 win, just crappy team. Like the split in the conference doesn't make sense. I have to say, I mean, anybody going for this Michigan Iowa game, you have to hammer the over. Michigan's going to hit the over 35 and a half. They're going to hit that by themselves in the first half. They're Michigan's Michigan as a whole this season has only given up 10.6 points per game to their opponents. They could hold Iowa to a touchdown or even just a couple field goals.
Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous. I think Iowa's going to go in and get embarrassed, and I think personally it feels like it's almost worse to make it to the championship game and then get blown out by 40 points rather than make it and know that you actually have a chance. Which, again, it's football, so there's always a chance. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it just doesn't feel like it for Iowa.
Yeah. No doubt. Well, what do we got next, Dunk?
Well, let's finish off Friday and jump into the Pac-12 championship with, as you already said, Oregon versus Washington. Not the biggest spread, but honestly one of the most surprising. I don't know when this article's from. I saw that it was a 10-point differential. This one's saying 9.5. But let's see. Oh, this was
Yeah, I
updated
have
today.
10.
So, oh, okay. This is on CBS. It's close to 9.5. But either way, over under is 66.5 as opposed to the what was it, 35 and a half that the
Yeah.
Big Ten had. So I think that I think points are expected. Um,
I mean, it's gonna be wild to see Bo Nix, Heisman candidate, versus Penix Jr., Heisman candidate. They could both play out of their minds. And another conversation that we'll probably have next week or the week after, um, is they're both playing out of their minds, and they still both might lose, not to one another, but to Jaden Daniels at LSU, who these two teams are number 4 and 5, or however you look at it, whichever rankings. But two top 5 teams in the country. Everybody wants to see a Heisman come out of this one of these two teams. But Jaden Daniels could grab it easily on a 3-loss LSU team, but he deserves it. He has the stats.
yeah, it's amazing what Daniels has been able to do, um, especially when looking at these two quarterbacks who will be playing for the second time this season. Bo Nix, Michael Penix Jr., absolutely dominating college football. Washington ranked 3, which has to be the highest in a long, long time. And then Oregon at 5, which they've also had the resurgence of their program. But just to see what these two schools have been able to do. I think Oregon, although the lower ranked team has been a little bit more dominant, and they barely lost to Washington, which was their only loss on the season. So Washington's had some close ones, notably against Arizona State in the last couple weeks, and then Washington State even was probably too close for comfort. So, in my opinion, that's where their lack of odds would come in because usually as the third best team in the country, you'd have flying colors for winning chances. But Oregon's a good team. I think the Huskies saw that when they played the Ducks the first time. I think they've continued to see that as the Ducks have kept that gap wide, but the Huskies haven't necessarily. Still, whether it's 9.5 or 10, it does feel like that's too big. I would have said like a if you favor Oregon at all, I probably would have said -3. But I don't know. That 9.5 or 10 seems a little far fetched. But hammer the over on
Yeah.
66.5.
I mean, I think it's solely coming out of the fact that, in here it says that Oregon has won 6 games since they lost to UW, which, if this championship game is anything like that game was, it'll just be electric and come right down to the wire. But Oregon has Oregon has won 6 games since that loss, and it's all been by multiple scores, um, on average of 26 points or more. So I think that that's where it comes from. Whereas UW came right down to the wire against Wazoo, who's a losing program this season, in the final normal format of the Apple Cup, which is besides the point. I mean, Oregon's a great team, especially against the Beavers. Like they just throttled them last weekend. But I also think 10 is too much. I would have said maybe 3.5, maybe 4. Um, but I feel like it's a slap in the face to this Washington program who's undefeated. They're a top 4 school in the country, and they're 10-point underdogs to Oregon, who they already beat once this season. I mean, by no means am I taking Oregon lightly, but also growing up hating the Oregon Ducks because they pounded the Huskies every year of our childhood that we were fans of. I would like to see this be flipped on its head. I
Yeah,
hope
it
that
definitely feels.
UW comes out and plays the best game of their season.
Yeah, they're going to have to because there's literally no way they get in the playoff if they lose to Oregon. However, it does feel like the college football playoff committee wants Oregon in, which is why they favored them so heavily, but we'll get into that after we talk about the rest of these championships of who do we really think is going to make out to be the final four in the playoff. But let's keep cruising and see what else we've got as far as championships coming up. So far we've covered CUSA, Pac-12. MAC, Sun Belt, and Big Ten. So let's go with the other one you already mentioned is the Big 12 championship. Oklahoma State versus Texas with the second largest spread at Texas being favored by 14 and a half points.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think Texas has got this one. Um, I don't know. Oklahoma State, nothing special. Texas has uh, a big exit really on their back, leaving the Big 12 and going to the SEC, which is funny just with conference realignment and Texas leaving an existing conference that's already big, whereas the Pac-12 is crumbling and all those schools are leaving. Um, but Texas could go out on top with a Big 12 title, um, and then go into the SEC and have a whole new ball game.
Yeah, this is really Texas' last chance to be a good Texas team, probably for the next 5 to 10 years. As soon as they hit the SEC, they're dealing with the likes of Georgia, Bama, LSU, A&M, Florida. It's just not going to be as easy as it has been for them. And I think Oklahoma State's definitely a beatable team. I think this is one of the least fraud Texas teams that we've seen the last few years that are actually playing well. They're showing a pretty complete team, and so I do think Texas comes out on top. I don't know if they cover a 14 and a half spread. I think you could definitely pick the over, but it does feel like just knowing the Big 12 that this game will be closer than two scores.
Yeah, for real. Yeah, I think so too. Um, should be a good one. That is noon Saturday. So big noon Saturday, but that is Eastern time. So yeah, 9 a.m. kickoff. Good one to start the day off with. Um, yeah, that'll be a good one. Let's see. Another one that this actually, I think, has the closest spread, which is in our favor, is Boise State at UNLV. So the Broncos are going to Las Vegas, for a 12 Eastern, a 3 p.m., or sorry, 3 Eastern, 12 o'clock Pacific kickoff. And as any Mountain West fans were looking at coming off of last Friday and Saturday. Friday, big tiebreaker win for Boise State against Air Force that Duncan was at the game for. Um, and then held our breath for. We had to hold our breath for Saturday, which this was just wild. And I think that needs to be rewritten too. And that's part of the whole NCAA blah 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 dumb business, but San Jose State fans should be pissed because San Jose State beat number 1 UNLV, who is number 1 in the conference, and San Jose State went from potentially being able to host the championship to not being able to play in it because a computer said that they were not as good of a team as Boise State for the tiebreaker.
Yeah, and there's a lot of layers that you can unpack there, and we're obviously a little more biased to all of the parts of this as Boise State fans who we've gotten, very used to the Mountain West. UNLV has been in the conference since 1999, hasn't made it to the championship before. On the flip side, Boise State has played in it more than any other Mountain West team. And I feel like even if you didn't know that stat, you would probably be able to guess it because Boise State has dominated the Mountain West, even if they haven't won the conference every time they've played in the game. So I think you have that. I think it was unique this year because Fresno, San Diego State, Utah State, Air Force, none of them got in, and they are all typically better Mountain West teams. So you have UNLV and San Jose, who are typically not sitting here in this position. UNLV, the attractive option. They're in Las Vegas. The championship is in Allegiant Stadium, where if San Jose was in and we played San Jose, we would be going to San Jose, California. Not as appealing, as big of a moneymaker for the Mountain West. And you hate to think that, but something with those computer generated results had to take that into account because I mean, don't get me wrong, I am grateful that Boise State is in. It's been a roller coaster of a season. They fired the head coach. They've gone on a tear since then. It's just been wild to see what they can do. But I don't care what level of your Power Five, Group of Five, doesn't matter what it is. If you beat a team and then the next day find out that they're still going to the championship and not like, oh, we're a 1-10 team and we beat them, good for us. Like if it's you or them and you just beat them and now you're sitting at home watching them play in the championship, that just seems like it goes against every tiebreaker rule, anything for championships that you possibly could have. And the computers favored UNLV and Boise State, but I would be pissed, like you said, if Boise State was in that position, and we almost were. So, yeah, Mountain West, hot seat. You got to figure that out.
Yeah, I mean that's a mess with how it came down to it. I mean, one fan base out of the three was going to be pissed, and it shouldn't even be that way. I mean, I get that you can't do the head to head if all three teams didn't play each other, and you don't know who's going to be good or not when you make the schedule, but you have to go, hey, this team beat this team, and this team beat this team, and they have a better, I don't know, conference record or overall record. Like, does an overall record not matter at all? Does it matter for national rankings? Because conference record matters for a conference championship, which is great, but maybe bring in the overall record to it. I don't know, but to have a computer say on Sunday morning at 9 a.m. if your team made it or not, that sucks. So, all that being said, this will be, I think, the best matchup, not just because it's our team, but it's literally the two best in the conference. That's how it should be. It'll be a nice hot day in Las Vegas in December on a Saturday afternoon, and that's awesome. I don't know. I think it really can't get much better than that. 2.5 points is what I'm seeing. Boise State has the slight edge. Also, Dunk, we're looking for points. Over unders at 59.
Yeah, I see plus 258.5, so give or take half on both of those. But Boise State being favored in the 2 point spread, which is kind of cool, honestly, if you think about it. Our head coach got fired. We have two less wins than UNLV. We're playing in Las Vegas, which couldn't be a more biased city to play in. But Boise State's gonna have more fans than UNLV. People don't root for UNLV. It does not have the following that the Broncos have. I guarantee you're watching the game this Saturday and you see more blue and orange in the stands in Allegiant Stadium. Um, it's going to be pretty cool. And I was telling somebody this the other day. You would have asked me 4 weeks ago if you can get to the Mountain West Championship, would you say yes? And I would have said no because I felt like we'd maybe get there, maybe just do enough to get there, and then just get totally embarrassed. Don't feel that way anymore. After what we've been able to do the last few weeks and how we handled Air Force last week, we played 4 full good quarters of football. Taylor Green still has a little bit of work on accuracy, but special teams, our run game, our defense is even picking it up. Um, I think we cover, and I think we're going to win this Mountain West Championship against UNLV this year in Las Vegas. In looking for points, yeah, I think we'll do it. I think that's each team scoring in the mid 30s and the mid 20s, and I definitely think that that could happen, especially knowing that we do have somewhat of a soft secondary. Um, I do expect us to get some deep balls burnt on us early.
Yeah, definitely. I think it'll be a real test early. But got to give it to interim coach Danielson to, I don't know, not even turn the team around because we were coming off a win when we fired Avalos, but to grab these guys and rally, just get them to rally behind and say, "Hey, this is in the sights. Like it's up to you guys. Let's play for it." And they're here, and it's going to be a good one.
Yeah. Well, three left. Let's do a rapid fire on two and then end with the king. Um, we've got the AAC championship game, which is SMU at Tulane with a 4 point spread and a 48 point over under. Um, give me your winner there. Any thoughts on the AAC championship?
Yeah, I mean, I think this will be another close one. You know, you got a couple southern schools there, Louisiana and Texas, and yeah, I don't know, should be some good football, some strong fan bases again at these smaller schools. I mean, smaller, not smaller, like, Boise State gets 45,000 people in their stadium. Um, but just some strong, loyal fan bases. This will be a good one.
Yeah, both teams sit at 8-0 in conference play. So again, a very level matchup. And yeah, just gut. I'm gonna go SMU.
Okay, I like it.
Um, the other one that we haven't hit is Louisville versus Florida State, the ACC championship game. And Louisville having a surprising season. They haven't done much since the Lamar Jackson era, but Florida State um, lost their starting quarterback, so obviously not as hot of a team, but still 12-0, still undefeated, four in the country. Kind of on the outskirts now. I think everybody's waiting for them to lose potentially so that they don't have to put them in the playoff. Um, but Hunter, what do you think? Florida State, Louisville, um, pros and cons, I guess, because it's hard to say without Florida State's quarterback, who is really good, but they are still favored. My numbers are showing 2.5 right now.
Yeah, I see 1.5, so it's close. Yeah, I thought Boise State would be the closest matchup, but I guess this one will be, especially I mean, you look at Louisville, they're 10-2 going against this Florida State team. Um, does Florida State have it? I don't know. They throttled that team after a couple weeks ago when their starting quarterback went out. You know, do you have the adrenaline? Is it to stand up for your guy? Maybe. Um, but hey, these are the two best, so I think it'll be a great matchup. Um, I'm gonna take Louisville just so that Florida State is uh, not undefeated, and then it makes the decision that much harder.
Yeah, I like Louisville. I think that Florida State's probably a 6.5 point favorite if they have their quarterback, but that's just an if, and they're not going to have him. So let's see Louisville resurge and take it away.
Yep.
All right, well, last championship of our college football discussion going into this weird first weekend of December is the almighty number one in the country, Georgia, taking on number eight in the country, Alabama. Georgia favored by 6 points. You might have a slightly different one. And I'm seeing an over under at 54.5. What are we seeing? Are we seeing defense? Are we seeing points? And does Georgia officially establish themselves as a new dynasty program?
Yeah, I think we're really gonna see shot for shot. I think it'll be touchdown, touchdown, maybe another touchdown, maybe somebody answers with a field goal. We have a little bit, it's 14-10 Georgia early on. Um, I say at the half it's 28. mm, 28, 24. Georgia's up. But I think it's really going to be shot for shot and come down to it. I think we will keep around that 5.5, 6 spread. Um, but I'm taking Georgia on it.
Yeah, I like Georgia too. I think we've seen a lot of good come from Jalen Milrose and the Alabama squad. Nick Saban's always finding a way to lead his team, but I think Georgia's just dominant. You can't mess with what the Dogs have going there. Um, and they're just a good team. They're number one for a reason, and I think Alabama might be able to cover maybe. But I think Georgia comes out on top, stays number one in the football playoff rankings, and we'll see who they end up playing at number four.
Yeah. Well, let's move right into the college football playoff and a couple predictions, break it down, and let's say what we think because there's about anything that could happen right now.
Yeah, I think let's go with the teams that we are pretty confident, well, 100% confident will be one of the four, and then there's a million possibilities, but what are you feeling? What are you seeing out there that says this will be the top four?
Well, my vote of confidence, I have 50% of it because Georgia and Michigan are locks, I think. Um, the question comes down to if Alabama beats Georgia, do they both get in, or does Alabama get in over Georgia? Um, also, if I don't think there's fear that Michigan loses, and then Washington, Oregon, they would technically be tied. They would both be 1-1 against each other, but is Oregon the more dominant team? I've heard that the committee and nationally they want the four best teams. Like even if Florida State wins, I've heard that if Washington wins, if Florida State wins, that some people want Oregon in the playoffs over an undefeated Washington or Florida State. I don't know. It's all over. I think Georgia, Michigan, Washington wins and it comes down to Florida State. If they lose, tell me this. If they lose, do you put Oregon in there with 2 losses and have two Pac-12 teams? Probably not. That's not the national attention. Then do you put a one-loss Ohio State because they get an off week this week? Do you put a two-loss Alabama in there?
Yeah, that's what everyone in the country is wondering. I'd say definitely not two Pac-12 just with the teams that are out there. I do agree that they want Oregon in. If Oregon beats Washington, I do believe Oregon makes it and Washington does not. Um, However, this is a really good perspective. It says would a 12-1 Oregon team with just two top 25 wins, one would be over Washington, the other would be over Oregon State, have a better playoff resume than Texas, who is back. I'd say if Texas is officially back this year with three top 25 wins in the Alabama trump card. So I think that that kind of answers that right there. Is you go Georgia, Michigan, 1 and 2. Oregon beats Washington. But what if Texas wins the Big 12 this weekend and let's say Florida State also loses? So now the only undefeateds you have to worry about are Georgia and Michigan. So now you start the conversation. Is it Texas? Is it Oregon? Is it Ohio State, who only lost to Michigan? Um,
I
I don't
agree. I
know.
think there's no way with how stiff the top 8 are where 4 teams are undefeated, 4 teams have 1 loss. You can't put a 2-loss team in. So boom, right there. If Oregon loses, they are out. You cannot have a 2-loss team
Mm.
with this field of the final 8. I would be hard pressed to say that Texas gets in with a win, especially if Oregon has 2 losses. That means that Washington won. You have to put them in. You have to have Georgia, or I mean, you have to have Michigan if they win. If Georgia loses and Alabama wins, I bet it's Georgia, Michigan, Washington, Alabama.
So you're thinking if Alabama beats Georgia, which is a possibility, say Georgia's still in because they deserve it, but Alabama would also get that 4 spot.
I think that that's what the NCAA playoff committee would do, because even though Alabama's number 8 on the list right now, technically they're tied for the number 5 spot, so they're not as far down as you think, and it would come down to them beating the top dog.
Yeah. It's interesting. A lot of the stuff I've been reading is saying that it's incredible that it took to the 10th year this year of the college football playoff to make somebody mad, because really this committee's had the easiest go of it since its inception. Four
Yeah.
game playoff, let's take either all the undefeated teams or all the head to head matchups or the strengths of schedule. Okay, done, yet easy. Well, this is the first year that you're going into championship weekend with the potential to have the top 4 teams come out undefeated. But they don't want a Florida State without their starting quarterback in there at 13-0 when Alabama or Texas or Ohio State or Oregon are sitting there. But they have to. You cannot leave out an
Yeah.
undefeated team to put in a
What do I
one loss.
think's gonna happen versus what do I want? I want 4 undefeated teams going into the playoff, because it's not what the committee wants, and I want whatever they don't want, because how do you arrive at a massive decision like this?
Yeah, I would say 4 undefeated teams would be cool because this is the last year of the 4 team format and we're not going to see that again. However, I don't see Michigan losing to Iowa. I don't see Georgia losing to Bama, but I do see the possibility of 2 close games with Florida State, Louisville, and Oregon, Washington. And I think if Washington loses, they're out. I think if Florida State loses, they're out. I think then that's choosing probably Oregon for sure. And I think the big question mark is it Texas? Is it Ohio State? Is it yeah, really it's
Yeah,
those two.
do you want conference representation? Because then you wouldn't double up Michigan, Ohio State, you would throw your Texas in there.
Yeah, so you'd have SEC, Pac-12, Big
Big
12, Big
10.
10.
Yeah.
Which it seems like that would be good because we've always had ACC with Clemson in there. Florida State's been looking good. Um,
And then 2
seems like that
SEC
makes the most
teams.
sense. Yeah, 2 SEC teams. What's going to be crazy is if all the poor what ifs, like um, Alabama beating Georgia, Oregon beating Washington, Iowa beating Michigan, if all of these things happen, the last job in the world I would want this Sunday morning or Saturday night is being on the college football playoff selection committee. I
Yeah.
don't think that those things will happen, but I do think those 3 and 4 spots are a lot looser than it seems.
Yeah. I think that the one thing that I did hear today or recently this week is that some committee members already cast their votes before the playoffs. So they don't care what happens. That's also an interesting approach, because all these other teams who are not at the top of these 10 conferences that we said are not playing this weekend. They could play a bowl game in a couple weeks, but they're not playing an extra game in the championship. weekend.
Yeah, that is crazy that you could play in the Sugar Bowl, the Orange Bowl, the Cotton Bowl, depending on which ones are funneling to the national championship. And yeah, you might have had a couple weeks off. You might only have one loss, and you might be better than a team that made the playoff just because of what happened.
Yeah, I'm really excited for the 12-team playoff next year. It's crazy to look at this field and see how stiff this competition would be if it was or when it's expanded. Um, but this is about the best four-team scenario you can get for the uh final format that we have.
Definitely. Well, feels like we've kind of dissected that. Really curious to see what happens with Championship Saturday. And yeah, looks like we've got the Heisman Trophy ceremony coming up here in just over a week.
Yeah, hopefully we can get our good friend Joey Giglio on, friend and family member, because I think he would have a lot to say on the Jaden Daniels hype train for his case for Heisman.
Yeah, definitely. Heisman ceremony scheduled for December 9th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on ESPN. And I'm guessing the three in the chair that we'll see are Daniels, Nix, and Penix Jr. Man, it's gonna be close, but talk about some phenomenal quarterback play in college football this year.
Yeah, no doubt. It's been quite the season. I think we'll wrap up with the Seahawks, and then I think that we'll do a pretty big dive into the NFL next week, just because this one is so college football centric.
Yeah, well, right before we started recording tonight, the Seahawks took another loss, third straight in a row, or third straight, I guess I should say, against the Cowboys at home. It's, it just hurts to see them lose in those throwback unis that are so beautiful. Um, but they lost 35 to 41. Definitely a game within reach. Unfortunately, didn't get to watch it until the end. But Hunter, I know you got to watch more than I did tonight. Thoughts on what the Seahawks are doing? Gino goes off tonight, three in the air, one on the ground. DK has three. Looks like from the clips I saw on the post game that the Seahawks had a good game, and then they just totally soiled it at the end. Didn't touch Micah Parsons, best pass rusher in the league, and
Yeah.
basically almost sacks Gino for a terrible ending on fourth down. But what do you see? What do we like out of the Hawks? And with a tough schedule coming up, is there even a chance for the playoffs?
Yeah, I'm scared. I mean, I haven't had my hopes up, and that's why I'm glad Boise State's still playing football. Um, but yeah, Gino coming off a great game. DK, literally the best game of his career. He caught one on the first drive and went, I don't know, 73 yards or something, just moving down the field. And then he was just everywhere that he needed to be, that Gino needed him to be. Gino was dropping dimes in the breadbasket. Um, Looked great, really. If that game was 55 minutes of football, we would have won. The last 5 or 6 minutes were atrocious. The defense just sat on their heels, and then Gino took a couple shots on fourth downs that we just didn't get. And I don't know why we try to change it up or he gets so cute with it. I will say the one positive this week was he got rid of the ball. He hardly took any sacks. He threw the ball away when he needed to, no intentional grounding. Feel like that was a big point in the film room this week. It had to be. After these last couple weeks have just been ugly sacks. But also the penalties tonight combined between both teams, I think there was 20 or 21. And that's just not an awesome game to watch either.
Yeah, I hate all the penalties. I still think that we're the most penalized team in the league, which would be a great stat to shake, but I don't know if we're going to. Um, Unfortunately, came up short. 7-5 would have looked a lot better than 6-6. And in the next couple weeks, we've got the Niners and the Eagles coming up. We knew the Cowboys would be tough, but I still think they're frauds. I probably always will. Um, when they showed the next 5 weeks for the Hawks, I was thinking if we lose the next two, then we'll be 6-8, and then we can win the final three and finish the season at 9-8. Um, would be great if we could pull one off against the Eagles or the Niners, and seems like the Niners are the more likely team at this point. But realistically, I think that we're sitting at 9-8 to end the season, and it's hard to tell right now if that'll be enough for a wild card spot. We currently have the number three, but there's some losing record teams that are starting to heat up, like the Packers, who are coming up behind us and might try to make a run in the NFC wild card. So it is hard to say, but I do hope that they're able to figure it out at some point, get Kenneth Walker back healthy, and try to make a push for at least one of those wild card spots.
Yeah, we have to. I hope so. I think Niners again are going to be tough, like we saw on Thanksgiving, especially at their house. Especially them also coming off of being favored in week, what's this, 13? They're favored at Philly, reigning NFC champs Philly. I mean, somebody's going to have to prove the 49ers wrong because nobody thinks otherwise right now.
Yeah, they just have a complete team. McCaffrey's amazing, great receiving core, solid D. So that'll be a big sign what the Niners do with the Eagles. And then I think that I saw on Scott Van Pelt tonight that we actually just got flexed to a Monday night against the Eagles. So I'll have to double check that. But that'd be great to throw another prime time in after two Thursdays in a row in the last week. So pretty
Yeah.
unique.
Yeah, well, good to be back at it. We'll get this one on YouTube too, which has been a couple weeks, and we're just excited to be back with episode 176.
Yeah, full episode in the books. Thanks everybody for your patience, but also always tuning in. If you're missing a little bit of content from us, go back. I'm sure there's one that you haven't been able to play, or if you're like Jim, who listens to them all anyways, go find your favorite interview and jump in on one of those. But yeah, thanks for everybody for tuning in. Thanks for letting us do a deep dive on some college football, and we'll be back next week with hopefully the results of this championship weekend and what we're looking at for the playoff.
Yeah, I like the sound of that. Good overview, good preview, and Dunk, as always. Let's climb the ladder.
Love it.